crowd control or CC is something which you need to understand, not only for PvP, but of course, especially for PvP if you want to do a lot of PvP. And it is also useful to know that in PvE. In PvP, you have, if you have the feeling that you're always on the ground and never can get up, and it's just about CC and there's perma CC, then it's most likely because you don't use your CCs or super armor and immunity effectively. So to prevent that, or give you guys a little bit more explanation or guidance around the subject crowd control, I'm going to use this image here. And first of all, you need to know that there are two categories of CC. I have simplified it. Also, the terms are like, there will be some different terms for it, but it is easier to use those terms to categorize those different kind of CCs. We have the hit effects and the debuffs. Let's talk first about the hit effects. Hit effects are stagger, knock up, knock down, knock back, pull. Those hit effects are kind of like soft CCs, and you can get immunity to that. I will talk about the immunities later. The next kind of CC we have are the stun, freeze, petrify, dots, curses, blind, stats reductions, and of course there is one more which is missing in this list, which is the earthquake from Zerker, for example. He has the earthquake. And those specific, in PvE you can resist those with runes, but runes won't work in PvP. And some of the dots and curse and so on are stackable. So let's talk about the immunity next. There are three kind of immunities. Stagger immunity, which will give you immunity to only this hit effect. You can stagger enemies by just using auto attacks. So if the enemy is just running around in PvE or PvP, you can just use your auto attacks to stagger the enemy. Stagger immunity can be achieved by using any kind of skills. So if you use any skills, you will be stagger immune during this animation. Or if you use your auto attacks, you're also stagger immune. Mobs are not stagger immune, the normal mobs. Then we have the super armor, which is like this one. There will be some skills which will have super armor from the beginning. You don't have to use any tripods. But some other skills won't have super armor as a default stat effect or like a default effect. You have to tripod those. For example, let me show it to you. There is this one has no super armor, but you can tripod it to make it a super armor skill. The super armor will give you immunity to all hit effects. You can't get staggered, knocked back, knocked down, or pulled during the duration of super armor or while you are casting a skill which has super armor on it. But you can still get stunned, frozen, petrified, can get dots, and everything related, like everything in this category can still get applied to you while you have the super armor. So using super armor will prevent those stuff, but not prevent hard CCs. The third kind of immunity you have in game is called all immunity. All immunity is something which you can only achieve by using your awakening skill. All immunity will give you immunity to everything, both of the categories which you could see earlier, like to hit effects and status effects or abnormal effects. There are only few classes which have skills which gives you all immunity. For example, Warlord has this counter attack which will give you all immunity for like 1 or 2 seconds, and during that time you can't get hard CC'd with stun or petrify or like frozen, whatever. Let's focus on PvE first. Now that you know the general concept, like how CC works and which kind of CCs are in game, in PvE you will have trash mobs. You can chain CC them, there is no diminishing return. Then you have the elite mobs, which will have a yellow outline. Those mobs have super armor, which means you can't do hit effects on them, but you can still use abnormal effects or status effects like frozen, shock, and so on. And then at the end, of course, we have the bosses which have the all immunity, but it's a different kind of all immunity because you can still apply armor reduction debuffs and dots and so on, but you can't hit effect CC them or hard CC them with stuns, freeze, shock, and so on. Okay, now about PvP. All those things which I explained by the mobs category applies to PvP too, but there are some exceptions. There is diminishing return. For hit effects, there is a diminishing return of 3. We are excluding here stagger, like knockdown, knock up, knock back. Those two have diminishing return after 3 of those. Like you can knock up an enemy 3 times in a row, and then you can't knock the enemy up another time because he will get a super armor. He will get a yellow outline. You can't hard CC or debuff someone who is already knocked down or like lying on the ground. You can't hard CC someone. So it is a waste to use a stun, freeze, or a shock or a earthquake on someone who is already on the ground. You can't also use 2 hard CCs. I'm gonna call them hard CCs. I think it is clear what I mean with that. Those are the stun, freeze, and so on. You can't use 2 hard CCs on the row. This also not only applies to you, it also applies to your teammates. Which means, back to this, you can knock up and knock down 3 times in a row enemy player. But if you did it 2 times and your teammate does it once, it also counts towards the 3. So you can't knock him up anymore. Once again, stagger effects, if the enemy player is using any skills or auto-attacking, you can't stagger him. Then we have the stagger and pull diminishing return. So if you are successfully, like if you manage to stagger your enemy because he was just running around, not using any skills or not using his auto-attack, there is also a diminishing return on stagger. It is like 9 or 10 stagger effects or stagger hits. After that, he will get also diminishing return on his or diminishing return buff for staggers. Okay, so that's it for now. I think that's the basic which you need to know for PvP, especially for PvP and PvE. If you have any questions, you can ask in the Twitch chat now or later on YouTube in the comments.